Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are in our Emerald 35th season, our Emerald anniversary, I interview people who are writing or absorbed by the importance of writing and talk to them about how they got there. We talk about what they're doing, what they've accomplished, what they're planning for the future. We occasionally have other brands of artists on. We've had on sculptors, we've had on musicians, we've had on actors. So if you have an idea for a creative person who might be a good match for the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the show. We'd love to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming out of 1623 Studios is a result of cable access television. It's a wonderful community service, an important community service that you don't get if you access the internet through Dish or other means. So stick with cable, stick with the Writer's Block. I'm happy to say today we do have guests who are very deeply concerned with writing and getting writing out to the public. They are the owners of 2 bookstores on Main Street here in Gloucester. They are Arwen and Caroline and Lucas. Arwen, Severance, Caroline, Harvey, and Lucas Cotterman. We'll be talking to them about how they got here and what they're accomplishing. Arwen, Caroline, Lucas, welcome to the Writer's Block.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to be here.
I should have said your last names, of course. Arwen Severance, Caroline Harvey. I forgot the first time around. And
I can't believe you rememred all 3 of that. That's pretty good. There's nobody holding up cue cards over there. That's good.
Well, the cue card guy is off today.
Day off.
I want to ask, as I said before the show, about some basic background. Where are you from originally, Arwen, and where did you go to school?
Born in Winchester, Mass, but grew up mostly in Norwood and Virginia. My dad is a chef, so we moved around a lot. He would open up restaurants. For most of my childhood, he worked at Pier 4 in Boston. That's why we were in Norwood, and then we were in Virginia opening up a bunch of restaurants. So then back to Winchester for high school, and I went to college at North Adams State.
So you're a Massachusetts woman?
Yes,
born
yes.
and bred?
Education degree for early childhood was what I majored in.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Caroline Harvey, where are you from?
I was born in Albany, New York. I spent primarily grew up outside of Albany in a place called Wine and Skill, but my grandparents came to Gloucester in 1941, I believe. My grandfather, Arthur, was an attorney in Albany, and they wanted a break. So he and his wife, my grandmother Alice, got in the car and drove from Albany straight to the ocean, and ended up going in with another family on a little cottage in East Gloucester near Niles Beach. Long taken in a storm.
It was right on the beach.
But it was, right, right there near Niles. So I've been here in Gloucester at a variety of points for a variety of lengths of time since I was born.
Good, you found it.
Yes, I found it. They found it. I stayed.
Lucas Cotterman, where are you from?
It's a tough question. I was born. My parents were living in New York, but I was born in New Jersey, and then I guess I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, the most. I moved there when I was about 2 months old. Then I went to college in New York, and then I think that maybe the largest amount of time I spent about 17 years up and down the California coast, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Big Sur. Yeah, the California coast. So I guess, I would say I would spend my formative years in California, but I might have an attachment to North Carolina in a lot of ways too. And I've been in Gloucester for 7-8 years or so. My partner Caroline was actually the first person who brought me here. And we had, I was living in Big Sur. I was living in Big Sur, on a cliff overlooking the ocean. And I had met Caroline, and I said, well, why don't you just move to Big Sur? And Caroline said, well, why don't you move to Gloucester? And I said, I don't know what that is. And
So you
Why?
prefer the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, though?
It's a tough sell, but I do. I prefer being where my partner is. I think first of all, but it was an easy sell for me being in Gloucester. First time I was here, it was just an immediate connection. It's an incredible
So you've been here for 8 years.
8 years.
And
Yeah.
how long have you been here, Caroline?
Well, we met when I was living in California on and off. It's hard to track the chronology. You know, time is sort of a flat circle, ever repeating. I can't break it down for you. Math's not my strong point, but we, I guess I moved back to Gloucester and haven't moved out in 2017, despite chunks of time in California with you.
But you've been here most of your life.
But
off and
I've
on.
been here most of my life,
Yeah.
off and on.
Okay. And
Sorry, John, you're going to get what you get with us.
I'm glad to know that.
Yeah.
I tell people, I've been here for 50 years, and I tell the local people, say, oh, that doesn't count.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
When we're well aware of that, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you weren't born here 380 years ago, you're still a tourist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Arwen, how long have you been in Gloucester?
about 23 years.
23.
Yep, I met my husband, who was from Gloucester, and that's how I ended up in Gloucester.
They do that, right? It's just
They
like
do that at the rum line,
No.
no less.
Oh, of
No.
course.
Wow.
Yes, yep. I'm sure a
Okay.
lot of people in Gloucester.
Yeah.
Yep.
Marriages, divorces, all at the rum line. all the
Yes,
time.
yes.
Now, I want to get a little history. You own shops on Main Street. You two, Lucas and Caroline, own Dogtown Books. You own the bookstore,
Mhm.
a tenth of a mile apart. Tell me a little brief history of how you got Dogtown Books together, Lucas and Caroline.
Yeah, I mean, I'll accept your help with this too, because my memory is not what it was. But so I had this was in our early courting phase, I think, and Caroline was showing me the finer points of Gloucester, and one of the finer points, you know, I think one of the first things I said when I got here was this would be a great place for a bookstore.
And we were walking on Main Street
Yeah.
when Lucas said this would be a great place to open a bookstore. And I said,
Perfect.
well,
There's two.
take about 10 more steps, as we were right near where Passports had been. And, you know, in a few steps, there was Dogtown Books.
Yeah,
So
and
I was like,
yeah,
and also, it's not the only one. You
Right.
know, let's cross the street and walk down the other side. So I remember thinking in that moment, like, oh no, he was excited about doing something here. And I just dashed those hopes, you know, too bad there's already a bookstore.
yeah.
But then fate had some other
It was
things
yeah, it
planned.
was strange kismet. So I went in, and Bob Ritchie was the owner at the time, and also co-founder of the store many years before that. And I just loved the store. It was just that like that used bookstore chaos of things and piles and stuff everywhere, and just it was the hunt when you went in there, and I adored it. And I think it was either the first or second time that I was in there. Certainly the first time I visited Gloucester, and I overheard Bob talking about retiring to another customer, and I just said this is a great place to have a bookstore.
You said you overheard Bob.
I overheard Bob.
He was the
Bob
was the owner.
previous.
owner.
He was
of
the owner, and he, you know, I didn't know, and I felt a little strange eavesdropping, but I contacted him. I took his business card and I
Well,
called him.
before you called and contacted him,
Yeah.
you were here visiting me, but I was doing something else, and Lucas had an afternoon to himself, and you went to the bookstore.
Mhm.
Overheard Bob talking about wanting to retire, but who's going to buy a bookstore? And you
Right.
sort of, you know, quietly took his business card, and then you walked outside and texted me, should we buy a bookstore? Just no context, and I wrote back, yes, obviously. You know, no idea what he's talking about, but yes, we should do that.
How much time
Sounds
was
good.
there between that kind of epiphany moment and when you signed the papers and took over?
2 months? 3 months?
maybe 3 months, because it was sort of yeah, I mean, it was new. It was a new operation to us, and also like probably to anybody, like how you quantify something like a used bookstore. Like, well, how many books in here? Like, I don't know, maybe 50,000, maybe 80,000. I don't really know. You know,
And
sort
you
of like
still lived in California
Yeah.
and still had another job.
right. Well, there's
And
that.
what year was
Right.
that when you signed the papers?
2019.
19.
Yeah.
So 7 years.
Yep.
Yep.
Mhm.
Arwen, tell us how you got into bookstores.
My mother-in-law, Janice, who owned the bookstore before me. I bought it from Janice. It will be 7 years in May.
So about the same.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep. So my husband was in the Army, we lived in Hawaii. We had our first daughter over in Hawaii, and we were just decided we were not going to be a military family. So we moved home, and this is Josh's home. And I started working at the bookstore with Janice, and just fell in love with it. So and it was perfect because we had a small child, so I could do like mother's hours, and also her grandchild, so she couldn't, really say no to that. So just kind of started working, as many hours as I could at the bookstore with Janice. And
so your mother-in-law, and she founded it with Susan Beatty, I think. Is that right?
Nope. Ann Banks.
Ann Beatty.
Ann Banks. Ann Banks was the original owner. Sold it to Janice and Susan Beatty.
Oh, I thought they owned it together for a while. No.
Nope.
Oh.
Susan and Janice did. I don't know the exact how many years Susan stayed in it, but then Janice bought Susan out. I want to say at least 20 years before I bought it. I think it was all kind of going on when we were in Hawaii that she was buying the store from Susan. So then I bought it from Janice. But Ann still comes into the store. She's in her 90s, the original owner, and still comes into the store.
Really?
Yep.
Well,
Yeah, she is phenomenal.
Good for her.
She's an incredible lady.
So you had to sign papers, although it was kind of in the family.
Yep. Yeah, Fayette, and they have good friends that are Bob Stewart's a lawyer, so we kind of did our own little thing. It was pretty informal, and just bought it from her. Janice was ready to retire.
And now you own it by yourself.
Now I own it by myself. Yes.
That's interesting how you both came into these different ways.
But around the same time.
Yeah. I don't think I realized that. That's really neat.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to some of my questions here. This is a vague question, but I want it to be intentionally vague because I want it to be an open topic conversation. Are people reading, and what are they reading? Let's start with you, Harvey.
First, people are reading.
Just a real easy one.
People are definitely reading. For me, which I think will be probably a little bit different than for these guys, so our store is basically, a lot of fiction, a lot of nonfiction. We have a huge children's section, YA section, which is young adult, cookbooks, and our nautical section is obviously pretty big, considering where we are. So they're kind of reading, a lot of that stuff. And I believe I was just at a NEBA book conference, and there are constantly new booksellers coming into these conferences, and they're having actual, sessions with, if you're a new bookstore owner, go to this session, and I see more and more of it. So I think it's pretty hopeful. I feel like there's a lot
hopeful.
I'm very hopeful. I think there's a lot of new independent bookstores opening up. I feel like people realized what was happening and made an effort.
I know people, because I'm involved in books. I know people in Gloucester are just amazed at the fact over and over again there are 2 bookstores downtown.
Yeah, I hear that
They're kind of amazed
right?
that Gloucester has multiple bakeries. Most towns, Gloucester size, don't have one unless it's in the back of Shaw's or something like that.
Yeah.
Are you reading? Are your people reading? Or is your perception that people are reading?
I like your question, are you reading? Because that's a good one,
right?
Right. We definitely thought we had, an early naive fantasy that we would own a bookstore, and that would involve us sitting with like a high-end, espresso, and novel after novel looking very fabulous, and the store would run itself.
It's a great idea.
Pretty quickly realized you actually have to work
A lot.
What horrors?
Yeah, I know.
Horrors.
I think probably we all have different and similar thoughts. To add on to what I see you doing, which I love, is and the relationship between our stores, and I have the number for your store right next to our phone because we're getting calls for books that I know you'll have and we don't. and you're a new bookstore, meaning your books are new.
Yep.
But your curation is really beautiful. You're not just like grabbing whatever's new and hot. You're grabbing whatever's new and important and within your aesthetic and, what speaks to our town, which I love. And I think we share that in a similar way where we don't want to gatekeep and only put out the books that we like because we want to encourage people with variety of interests to come on in. But we also do get to put out what we like and not what we don't like. So I think what I notice is that, yes, people are reading for sure, and they want to talk about what they're reading. But what interests me a lot as well is the actual object of the book. And sometimes people are buying books from us and maybe from you too, although I can't speak for you, because the object itself is really important. So there might not be, a strong desire to reread every page of Catcher in the Rye or, Moby Dick. Maybe they've already read it, but to own the object and to have it feels important. And I could kind of, talk at length about why I think that is and why we have certain attachment to objects. Because of where we are in the world and because of how much has gone virtual, how much we miss contact.
Yeah, you touched on something I think it's interesting. The Arwen store is more new book oriented, and you are, maybe Lucas can fill us in. Your perception of the readers might be different because the books you put out are different. What is your product over there?
I mean, I think to answer that and to also answer your last question, I don't know if people are reading, but I know people are buying books, right? So I think people are coming into our store and they're buying the artifact. And whether I don't think we're dealing exclusively in nostalgia. I think people are taking books home and they're reading them and they're enjoying them. The piece for us that I came to a realization fairly recently about was that to avoid sounding like an organic restaurant, we locally source our books. So our books all come from Cape Ann. We buy our books. We buy libraries in Cape Ann. People in Gloucester bring bags of books into the store that we buy. So when people come into the store, what they're seeing is books that local people have bought and read and brought to us.
Some from your shop.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Hence the really cool bookmarks.
Yeah.
You guys bring me look at this bookmark.
Yeah.
How old was that?
It's a little circle of life, but it's also like how interesting. I mean, I guess you can do that sort of thing in maybe record stores and secondhand stores and things like that if you travel a lot. But what a way to get into the psyche of a town, to see like all of the books that people are reading and they're bringing back and they're buying again and things like that, and that sort of cycle. It's a really great thing. I don't know if that answered your question. I got it. That was tangential, but yes.
Good.
You can tell
So
too from the inscriptions.
Right, from the
I
inscriptions.
love when your posts, when you post, like, they'll open up a book and the inscriptions are like phenomenal. There's drawings, there's, love letters, there's poems.
Always,
and it's, you probably somebody in this town knows who wrote that or drew that.
Exactly.
So that's the kind of cool thing I love and seeing your posts. It's so cool.
There's a local writer who just came out with a book, which is it's a memoir based on the book she was given from almost infancy, they're really early, to being a middle-aged adult, and what they meant to her as she went along. It's interesting.
Wow.
And this is interesting too. You all three have kind of a zoned into the soul of Gloucester through their eyes and brains.
Yeah.
I mean, I still, and I if there's time at some point, I can show it, but I have the 3-volume set of Anne Sexton poetry that you bought me from Dogtown Books the day that you were there and discovered that Bob wanted to sell the store.
Right.
And it's in its box set, and it has Bob Ritchie's business card in it. And I love Anne's poetry, and I'll read it all day long, but I really love having that object and knowing the lineage of it.
I
Yeah.
can't get it. I've never read on Kindle. I'm never going to read on Kindle, a Kindle text. And people come into our house. We've got some built-in bookstore, built-in bookcases.
Yeah.
And people come in and say, "You read all those?" I say, "Well, most of them."
Do they ask you that at your shop?
Have you read all these books?
Yep, they ask us that. Have you read all these?
No.
It's a moment of sadness every time for me when I realize I'm getting older and like there's no way. Like I'm at the point now where there's no way I can read everything in our shop.
Yeah.
But
I get that question a lot.
Well, I think it's a mark of being older that people still read. Older people read. They have different habits. I have completely different habits than my kids have.
right.
And thank God. How have you adapted to the electronic, digital, internet, web age, Lucas?
Oh, I mean, not at all. I don't think.
Good.
I mean,
Good answer.
really, like,
I'm with you.
I mean, we're a used bookstore. I mean, we, to be fair, we have a website. We sell things on other websites and online. But in terms of adapting to a digital culture, I mean, we're the antidote to a digital culture at the moment, and we saw that really strongly post-COVID. We were closed for a time, and when we reopened, people were like shell-shocked at how much time they'd spent in front of a device, and they couldn't wait to like have a book to read because it was humanizing in some way, and I think we're not necessarily Luddites in the bookstore, but we like books, and books are just not digital objects. And I don't fault anybody. I mean, I myself, like, I'll listen to a book on tape. I know people listen to audiobooks and things like that. People read Kindles. I have a Kindle. It's holding up my nightstand. But that's all totally fine. I mean, the question used to be, how has Amazon affected your business, or how has Barnes and Noble affected your business? Mm-hmm. And there are answers for all those things, but the really one true answer is we just kept doing what we're doing, and we feel like we're doing it well enough that people enjoy spending time in our store.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Caroline, several times the physical importance of the book, and people who come to a bookstore are looking for that.
Right. And sometimes they don't know they're walking into a bookstore. We were chatting before the show about how people come in and they sort of go, "Oh, is this a bookstore? Like, do you just sell books?" And there's this could be a moment of shock, especially for someone of a different generation or from a particular area where they haven't seen that. But I think also to add on to that and maybe connect to where you're going next, that when we were buying the store, I remember, you start mentioning things to relatives and friends, and anytime you're going to something that's slightly against the norm, there was some looks of concern of like, you're buying a what? Are you going to be able to live? Like, will you have any money? Like, how's this going to happen? And this real fear factor of like, but Kindle, but Amazon, but the internet. And for me, both exist. Both can be true. Yeah. There are, for me, it's been a long time, but when I was traveling more, when I was teaching at Berkeley and traveling a lot more, I did have a Kindle. And it was for like just crappy, beautiful escapist books that I read and don't remember, that I didn't want to own the object of. And then there were books like the Anne Sexton piece or things from my childhood that I want to re-find that I want to own. So I think it works better if we both exist and it's not a war.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. And Arwen, I started out, the question was, have you adapted to the digital age?
No.
In the store?
No. I don't have a POS system. We do our inventory by hand. And
you do? Inventory by hand?
Oh, yeah. We count the books one by one in January.
Yeah.
I get a bunch of people.
A magic wand that scans everything?
No. All my invoices. We did QuickBooks for like 2 years, and I was like, forget it. I can't do this. I have to see my invoices, mark them off on the statement, send the check. So in that sense, we don't do any of that. But for me, like, I notice the minute somebody walks into the bookstore, their stress level goes down. They say, wow, you smell like a bookstore. Like the smell. They
Yes,
love
the
the smell.
smell.
And I don't really smell it anymore,
Right.
because we're in it
Yeah,
every
me
day.
neither.
But
Yeah.
like, people love it because I think it's nostalgia for some of them, but it also just, everyone takes a deep breath when they walk in. I mean, I see that a lot.
Yep.
Like a visual response from walking in the store. And I'm sure you guys see
That
it too.
is so
Yeah.
beautiful and
You know?
accurate.
Yeah.
It's
like
there's a
they
biochemical.
instantly
softening.
relax. And, you know, and I know that's true at your store, but dogs are welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring as many dogs as you can in the store. People
Your
love
kids
it.
are actually welcome.
Kids are welcome.
Right?
Yeah.
And you guys are always posting pictures of the cutest dogs. But so I just think it's that's just we keep it very very basic and very tactile, and I think that's just
Yeah,
I do better with that
I love a
anyways.
book in my hand.
Yeah.
You guys have a grandfather clock.
So that clock is so Ann Banks, who opened the store. That's her family's. So
Oh,
her son
wow.
Lansing, once in a while, will come visit it. Like, oh, just checking on
Just
the
checking
clock.
on the
Checking
clock.
in. Yeah.
Like, it's doing beautiful. It stopped working briefly for, well, probably about 2 years. It stopped chiming. I couldn't get it, it stopped telling time. And I had this gentleman come in a year ago, and he was like, oh my God, your clock is so beautiful. Like, it's not working. I'm like, no, it hasn't worked. He's like, oh, my dad and I used to fix clocks. Would you mind if I brought in some, my tools? Came in, fixed it, spent an hour on it, chiming, telling time, wouldn't take a dime. He's like,
Wow.
I just wanted to hear it chime. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And those are the moments that
It was
can
incredible.
right? You can have great moments online, and you can't have that online.
Yep.
So both,
Yeah.
like
exactly.
that's incredible.
This
Exactly.
has been fun. And the mark of a good show is that they go fast to me. This went really fast. I didn't get through half my questions. I'm not going to get half my questions, but we're almost out of time. And if I don't keep to my half hour, then the people after my half hour get ticked off.
Well, we'll
So
have to
I
do
want-
a part two.
Yes, we
we'll
could do a
it.
part two.
Yes, we could do part two. I want to thank you, Lucas Cotterman.
Thank
I
you.
want to thank you, Caroline Harvey. I want to thank you, Arwen Severance, for being with us. This is fun. And I hope now that attendance booms, purchases boom, and especially after this goes to YouTube. Thank
Yes.
you.
gonna happen.
The whole
Thank
world.
you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you all.
us.
Yeah, John,
It
you're
was
the
fun.
best.
I want to thank our TV audience as well. If you've learned something about these two wonderful bookstores located downtown Gloucester on Main Street, and something about their owners and their love of books, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next time on the Writer's Block. Good night.